Welcome to Evolvepreneur Podcast Channel. Today we're talking with Susan Friedmann about author marketing. So just before we get into what Susan's background is, welcome Susan to the show.
Thank you, John. It's so great to be here.
Cool. And we've spoken a few times, so we'll just be like an old friendly chat today. So
Absolutely. It seems as if, it's like a daily occurrence.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? So
I ask you for help.
We'll have to stay on track, right? All right. So Susan is a CSP, well-respected niche marketing expert who's on a mission to wipe out the sameness and add vitality and differentiation to the author marketing. For over 25 years through her company Aviva Publishing, which I'm probably not pronouncing right, she coached over 400 non-fiction authors to use their books to become recognised, trusted authority in the field. Susan has written 17 books. She's written more than I have. I'm up to like 7 now. Doing her bestsellers, meeting and event planning for Dummies, Riches and Niches, and she's appeared on a variety of radio shows and talk shows, and hosts the award-winning podcast Book Marketing Mentors, which I actually appeared on an episode of. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So what's a CSP then?
CSP is Certified Speaking Professional, and it's the only earned designation from the National Speakers Association. And you have an Australia Speakers Association, which is affiliated to our organization as well, which makes up what is known as the Global Speakers Federation.
Gotcha. So, I actually went to one of those events once, took for a friend who wanted me to go. He was actually, I think he was president or something of the thing. Anyway, there was a really good speaker there, and she was really good. She did a really good job. And then she's got this book. And by the time I got home, I'd forgotten what the book name was. And I had to Google her and try and figure out who she was. And it's quite interesting. She did a very good, impressive presentation, talked about her book, and told no one where to get it. Like it was no.
I've heard that story before. It's like, what a shame, because I don't think that too many people would be as diligent as you and go and look it up.
Yeah. So. Because I was quite interested in the book and I made contact with her. But the thing is that she, it's almost like you have to go to a bookstore and ask for it and buy it, but you're not going to remember the name. And it's like, so that's the thing about marketing is that people forget what I call the CTA, which is call to action. So they almost like, oh, that's too salesy, I won't put that in because it sounds like I'm trying to sell something. So I'll try to make it subtle and let them figure it out for themselves. And in marketing,
that's a really good point. And you know that I work with a lot of non-fiction authors in my publishing company, which, by the way, is called Aviva Publishing. But that's okay.
Got close.
Very close. And interestingly enough, one of the biggest fears that they have is actually selling and marketing, that they feel as if it's sort of like a 4-letter word.
Yep.
And it's icky and they just want to stay as far away from sales and marketing as they can. It's like, you do it for me. I'm like, no, you're going to do it. That's not what I do. I hold your hand, but I don't do it for you.
And I think the biggest problem with marketing is that people think that, that salespeople, by definition, like lower level, like like you put them right down the bottom of the funnel. But the reality is there's nobody sells anything. Nothing ever happens, right? And so they kind of need each other. It's almost like the sales and marketing guys, always have sort of bad rap. But the reality is they need each other. And we actually used to run a software company, and we actually had a bunch of accountants. We used to sell accounting software, and of course, bizarrely, the software company decided that they get accountants to sell it for them because it's accounting software, right? It makes sense. But those accountants couldn't sell to save themselves, right? Because it wasn't their gig. And so we actually brought them in on a course and actually taught them how to sell. And one of the things we asked people, and it's a really good question to ask people, what's your opinion of salespeople, right? And then they'll give you a bad opinion. Oh, they're sneaky, they're sales, they're tricky, they do that. And I said, you just defined yourself because you're a salesperson in your own business. So that's what you think of yourself.
Well, so that's interesting to turn it around like that.
Yeah,
but you're right. I mean, they think of that used car salesman, and I don't know if you have those in Australia, but we certainly have them over here in the States.
Yep.
and that's somehow what people associate with the word sales. And yet we're all in sales. We've been selling ever since we, came on this earth, because
you're trying to get your mum to do something, right? You're in
yes,
sales.
you cried as a baby. You cry. It's like, give me food.
Aren't they? They're so persistent, right? Like if they want something, they're not going to give in.
Exactly. Give me what I want.
Yeah. I mean, I remember my son, like they were some toy or whatever it was, and he got one and he wanted two, right? And he didn't put a turn on it, but he kept on it, right? On and on and on. So went down to the shops and we got it and brought it back. He never looked at them again. Like he got the deal and that was it, right? It was like he just want to keep going until he got what he wanted. But the reality is that I think as you get older, you kind of get less, I guess more sensitive about it or something. But yeah, I think if you're on your own, if you think you're not in sales, you are. You're just trying to deny yourself the fact that you are, because if you don't sell, no one does.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is too with companies, as you said, you worked for a software company, and the first people to go when they need to make cuts are marketing and training. Those are the first people to go, because they don't see them as helpful on the bottom line. But sales, of course, they need, because that's their lifeblood, or so they think. They don't realize that, as you rightly said, that sales and marketing are intertwined. One needs the other. They can't really function without each other.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that I see a lot in websites is no customer service. So you see, say, an author site selling something, there's no way to contact them. All right, there's no way to actually say, look, I've got a problem with your website, and you may think there's something, you don't even know there's a problem, right? And suddenly something tells you, I've got a problem, can't order your books. And oh, pity, I wonder why I couldn't sell many books. That's because there was a problem, right? And no one has any communication tools, because they don't want to think that they don't have to deal with an inquiry, that they're just going to buy it and that's it, right? And it's just a book, right? And we sell books for a doctor, and we get some crazy requests sometimes, but those often lead to selling the book that we wouldn't have got otherwise.
Well, the interesting thing is, and talking about that, is that, so many authors think that they just have to put the book up on Amazon and it's going to sell itself.
Yeah.
And I tell them over and over again that Amazon is only a shop window. You've got to bring people to that shop window. It's not some kind of magic that once you post your book on Amazon, then you don't have to do anything anymore, because Amazon's going to take care of you. And that as a publisher and as an author, and working with authors as well. And so it still requires the marketing. It still requires you to go out there and toot your own horn and toot the book and your message to the marketplace.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about marketing, obviously with authors, but I think the reality is that if you haven't figured that out already, but the reality is that it doesn't matter what you're selling, a book or what you're selling. The same process is the same, right? It's no different.
Exactly.
And I think part of the problem is, and you probably get this too, is an author will come to you and go, I've written this fantastic book and now I want to market it. And you go, did you think about any of that before you wrote the book? You go, no, I didn't think of that. I'm going to try and make it and then I'll sell it. And what they didn't do is think about the strategy behind it and ask the questions about who, what, where and why, right, as far as I'm concerned. And so we're going to kind of talk about that today in terms of that. But the reality is, it doesn't matter if you're selling a book or whatever. You could use this print process for anything in your business, and it doesn't really matter. The same response comes back ultimately. So let's start off by saying, and this is the biggest one, is which market do you go after, right? Because when I say to someone, oh, who's this book for? You get this, oh, it's males, females between 35 and 45, right? I go, wonderful, you've just selected probably 40% of the population or something, right? And it's like, that's too broad. So how do you decide? And that's the biggest problem is actually deciding on a market and sticking to that market, right?
Yeah, and people are frightened when they pick a market, because they're saying, well, and like you, I the first question I ask is, who is this book for? And well, it's a universal message and it's for everyone. And I'm like, that's great. And how do you plan on marketing to everyone? Because
got a big budget.
Yeah, the Procter and Gambles of this world, the big boys, they don't do that. I mean, I think Nike's one of the best examples out there, how it's departmentalized each brand, according to the different sport.
Try buying jeans now, for God's sake. Like I took my son to buy jeans the other day. I said, why is there so many versions of jeans out there? Like, all for different sorts of people.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me that when we first came to the United States, I'm originally from England, as you know, but your listeners don't know. But I came to the US and I went to a supermarket for the first time. And you go down the aisles and there's just so many choices. And I was looking for something I recognized. I was actually just looking for detergent. Yeah. And I walked down the detergent aisle and it was overwhelming. And I have to tell you that I just broke down. I just cried because I had all these choices and they were it was just overwhelming. I just didn't know, which one to pick. And when people don't know and they're overwhelmed, guess what? They don't buy.
Yeah, confused mind never buys.
Yes.
And I think there's too many options too. Like if you have too many options. And I remember when we were in Australia and we had someone come from actually Zimbabwe, where they basically have a lot of choice over there. And they come over and they said, "We can't believe how many choices you've got." All right. And it's like, because somehow they've kind of got into a marketplace and they think giving people choice is going to make a difference, but sometimes it backfires on them, right?
Absolutely.
And you can learn a lot about going to a country's supermarket. You can learn a lot
without
about
any shadow of a doubt. I love it. This time last year we were in Australia and New Zealand, and I just adored it when we went to the supermarkets because I just wanted to see what you had on the shelves. And actually, my girlfriend who lives in Sydney, she took me to the supermarket, and she was so proud of the fact that you could get a lot of South African products because we lived in South Africa for a few years, and that's where I met her. And so she just took me down these aisles and said, "Look, you can get this and you can get that." And I was like, great,
And that's the funny thing, because there's a big South African market in Australia, particularly in a suburb called St. Ives. There's like South African Central, and they also sit in Western Australia as well. There's a big population in Western Australia because it's closer to South Africa. It's the next 4 hours less flight time.
That's right.
So there's a lot of concentration in those ones, and it was actually quite interesting because when I was selling software, they because it came from South Africa, the software I was selling, they go, "Oh, why can't you sell it? Like they got 90% of the market over there." So it was easy for them, and because we had so much choice here, like you can't believe how much choices are here. And it's like, well, can't you just sell them? It's like they come over, and every time a South African comes over to sell in Australia, it's like Australians eat them for breakfast because they basically just. And I remember this guy took a demo once, and he goes, "My God, this was hard." And I said, "Yes, because they're not in a hurry, and they have plenty of choice." And I think that's what comes down to books, right? They're not in a hurry. No one's usually in a hurry to buy a book, unless you've been told to buy a book and you must go buy that book for some reason. But at the same time, there's so much choice. As soon as they go doubt the whether they're going to press that button, then you've lost them. So that's
why I believe in niche marketing.
Exactly.
Because if you drill down into a niche and you can serve that niche and get away from being a generalist and become known as a specialist in a particular area, you don't have that kind of competition.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's definitely what I do with my authors, and I've done without even realizing it. And I'll tell you a story in a minute, but with my authors that I really encourage them to hone in on a niche market. And you said, they want males, females. Yeah. Okay. But, what industry? About, are they professional? Are they in sales? Are they in education? Are they in healthcare? What environment do they work in? Because the more you can niche down, the more likely it is that you might be the only game in town.
And I think the thing is, it's interesting. I've done a lot of work lately with software, and the same principle applies, right? And one of the things is, if you can, when I usually talk to someone to write a book, I usually say, look, write the book to one person. I want you to imagine the person you're writing that book to that one person only. And you think, oh, that's too narrow, like just to one person. But the reality is people, there's very similar, right? And there's a niche of different types of people. So you're not unique when you think you are. It's like, sorry to burst the bubble, but you're not that unique, right? Because there are people like you, and that's why you get friends like you, right? And I think the danger is that if you don't do that, then you should be able to talk to them as if you know them, as if you've been spying on them. If you know what I mean, like you've got a bug in their office. And I've had this with clients, like you must have a bug here. How did you know that? And it's just because I know that type of person. Right?
Well, and
I know them better than they do. Right.
Well, I find often that the author is actually writing to people like themselves, especially if they've experienced some kind of trauma. I was speaking to an author recently, and she was talking about the fact that she'd written a book and she'd been sexually abused, and she wants to help other people in her type of situation. And even however hard this was for her to write, she just feels she's got, on a mission, but she's on the mission to help people like herself.
Yes.
And so it's easier to determine, that person who she's writing for, because it's really, she's writing to herself in many ways.
And in some respects, you're repelling people as well. So in marketing should be attracting and repelling. So the reality is in that situation, people who don't want to have that conversation for whatever reasons, or, they're not interested in it or whatever, they're going to be repelled from that book. They're not going to buy that book. So, which is good, because what you do is you're trying to get the people who are interested in buying the book, not the people who are disinterested in buying the book, who are going to give you bad reviews as well. So you really want to make sure that you get the person that the book is intended for, and I think getting real clear on that is probably the best way. So in terms of let's say you work out who your customer, your prospective reader is, do you then stick to that reader forever? Do you sort of is it a concept of focus on one type of reader and then move through to other types of readers, rather than let's say you've got a chunk of readers and go, okay, if I break them into smaller chunks, could I then just go marketing after each of those chunks or do you stick to one chunk?
Well, and I think that's a really important point. And what I tell authors is, you've got to throw the pebble in the pond and the ripples will flow out. So start with one niche market, work that, have a strategy, establish yourself. And then if you want, you could take that same strategy and go into another niche market with that same strategy, which is very interesting because, my best-selling book, The Riches and Niches, How to Make It Big in a Small Market, is exactly a strategy that I use to become an expert actually in the trade show, the exhibition industry.
Right,
for 20,
dummies, right?
for 25 years, I was I had worked my way into the fact that I became the go-to expert in that environment, training exhibitors how to work trade shows, because they do such a lousy job for the most part.
Yeah, I've been down to 2 trade shows when I was doing software, and it's like, wow, that's,
Exactly. So I was there to train people how to do a better job. And then when I lost the passion for doing that, I looked at, what are the strategies that I actually use, which I'm not a person who strategizes at all, and so I had to sort of walk backwards in time and say, well, what did I do in order to become this go-to expert? Because is it something that could be duplicated for other people? And I actually came up with 7 strategies, which is how I compiled the book, because I was like, oh yeah, anybody can, let's say write a book. Anybody can create a name that says what you do. Anybody can go after the media. These are just strategies and tactics that I used to work my way up to becoming, a go-to authority.
Yeah, and I think that's a step-by-step thing, really, at the end of the day. And I think that's there's no myth or sort of, it's not, what's the best way, it's precise, it's what the marketing people do anyway. Like when you look at, and I think it's a study of what people do now, paying attention to that marketing. Like some people say, oh, I don't want to be marketed to. I actually love ads.
I love ads too. I mean, I love to see what other people are doing.
Why? Right?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, marketing is a very inexact science, as you know,
Mm.
which is very frustrating to anybody with an analytical mind who wants the A plus B equals C, because in marketing, A plus B equals C one day, D the next, and maybe E the next.
Yeah, and you don't know what's going to work and what's not, right?
Yeah, you just never know. So you just have to keep trying different things and then adjusting. It's always adjusting to see what works and what doesn't.
And I guess the thing too is, let's say you wrote a book, marketing for real estate agents or something. The reality is there's no reason you can't repurpose that book and write another book, marketing for mortgage brokers. I think in some respects people kind of say, oh, that's just the one book. But the reality is if you're on that kind of niche market that you can get into, put their name on the book. That's going to make a massive difference. It's almost like the closer you can get to the person's name on it in a title or a like a call to action, the closer you're going to get to a sale, in my opinion.
Well, and this is what the For Dummies series, John Wiley has done so well with the Dummies, and then Penguin has done with the Idiot's Guide. And I've got a Dummies book and an Idiot's Guide book, and they've really, done it by the topic. So my Dummies book was meeting and event planning for dummies.
Yeah.
And
very clear about what it's
only
for,
people
right?
who are interested in meetings and events are going to buy that book. And they've got, dummies for networking and dummies for fishing and fly fishing and, whatever. There's a dummies book and an Idiot's Guide book on pretty much most of the topics out there.
And it's interesting, actually, one of the things, I'm reading a book called The 80-20 Marketing Rule by Perry Marshall. And one of the things he says in there is look for someone who's got a bleeding neck because they'll want a bandage.
Exactly.
Right? And
that's that whole niche marketing as well. If you go after a market, and there's so many underserved markets out there, that you can, it's that low hanging fruit that people forget about. And
hitting themselves on the head on the way up trying to get the
you think that it's juicier at the top, but actually you can make it a lot easier for yourself if you, like you say, stick to the real estate market, and then you've got buyers, you've got sellers, you've got the mortgage people, the financial people, all involved in that. You've got the legal side. All of those, they're different components of that same marketplace, but each one of them could be a separate niche. Well, is in fact a separate niche market that if you were an expert in that market, you could go after it.
So tell me something, like, let's say you pick a niche market, and at which point do you decide that you've got the wrong market, it's not working? Because it's very interesting, because what I find a lot of people is that, particularly websites is the classic, right? And I see clients changing their websites every so often, every 6 or 12 months, something's a brand new website. And the reality is they visit their website more than anyone else, right? So everyone got sick of it, right? And we used to always have a saying in marketing is that if you haven't upset somebody by midday, you're not marketing hard enough, right? Right? Because the reality is no one's seen you, right? So you sit there and you've tried and you tried and you tried, and the reality is you think, oh, I've given up now because it's not working. And the reality is how much of that market's really seen your stuff, and do you give up and then change? Because you see these people change quickly between things. I'll try something for a month, it's not working, I'll try someone else. And it's a bit like networking when you go to networking events when you can in one day, is that if you keep going to that same networking event every month for a year, you'll get noticed by the people in the event. If you just go once or twice, try to swoop in there and try and create attention and then just swoop back out again, they'll just forget about you straight away. It's about consistency over time.
Well, and that's why, advertising, they talk about advertising that you've got to see a message at least 7 times before it even sort of computes in your brain that, oh yeah, I've seen that message and I'll remember it. So yeah, it's consistency, it's repetition. And just like your program here, you're repeating it consistently. The same with my podcast. I've been doing it now for 4 years, my Book Marketing Mentors podcast. And it's that consistency that every Wednesday at 3 p.m., that podcast goes out, come rain or shine.
Yeah.
And in fact, when my father passed away a few years ago, I actually did not put it out for 2 weeks, and I was beside myself. And nobody noticed.
Yeah,
nobody said a thing.
I know. Oh no.
And so I'm like, oh, it's only me. But it is that consistency now. And then people now say to me, oh, I listen to you every week. And I'm like, yay.
And I mean, it's something with LinkedIn, like we've got a LinkedIn marketing system that we use. And one of the things is I've used that system for, God, I don't know, 5 years now, right? And I've had people come and go on that system along the way. It's like they go for a couple of months and they drop back out again. And I go, how can you have got those sort of results? Like we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of sales out of it every day, right? Every day someone comes along and says, oh, yeah, I want to do business with you. But that's consistency, see? And they get used to that profile. Your profile builds up and eventually people start taking notice and then it all just falls on itself. So it's almost like eventually you'll get that effect where you've got enough marketing to put you over the edge, you start getting noticed, but you've got to keep doing it. And I think...
Well, Malcolm Gladwell calls it the tipping point.
Yeah, exactly.
So you go up and up and up and up and up, and then all of a sudden you take off. And, then people notice you. I mean, it's the same. I had a mentor many years ago who said it takes 15 years to become an overnight success.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, I was, when I say this in my presentations, and I say, but I don't want you to take 15 years, but it's not necessarily going to happen overnight.
No.
And if it does, it's sort of like an overnight wonder, a 1 minute wonder. They're here and gone. I mean, you
just
look
get
at
on
people,
TV, I'll be a millionaire, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, that doesn't happen. Well, occasionally. I won't say it never happens. It's like when an author comes to me and I say, well, what do you want this book to do for you? And, well, I want to sell 1 million copies. And I'm like, okay, and how big is your database? Well, I don't have anybody on my database yet. I'm like, well, I'm not going to say you can't do it, but I'm going to say the chances are pretty unlikely. Let's get a little more realistic with this.
Take a couple of zeros off that number maybe to start with.
To start. Let's start a little smaller. Let's go for the hundreds and then the thousands and then build from there. Yeah. Although I don't really like selling books in onesies and twosies. I prefer selling them by, the thousands and the millions if we can.
How do you think that's...
By the way...
Yeah. So what's the best way to think about that? Like, that's the thing about what people do is like they're trying to sell one book at a time. But the reality is, like, particularly as speaking engagements, one of the things that they said to me once was that if you bundle your books into your speaking engagement, and nowadays it's probably a little harder, with Zoom, it's not impossible, is to actually say, look, part of my speaking fee, you get so many books.
Exactly.
And that's a way of kind of getting the hands of those people who actually walk away with a book. I mean, that person that did this talk, I don't think she even had a book on her. She had one book, that was it. She didn't even have a book for sales. Like, she just did the talk, right?
Yeah. She was doing herself a disservice because actually, even if you have back of the room sales, you get sales because, if people liked you, they want to take a piece of you home. Exactly. And that piece of you is your book. So it's like a souvenir. It's like a memento, when you go on vacation. It's the same sort of mentality that people have. But going back to selling multiple copies of your book at any one time, my very first book, exhibiting at trade shows, tips and techniques for success. Let me get that right. And that was by, and I'm blocking on the name now, but that doesn't matter. But it was just less than 100 pages. And I was like, who could I sell this book to? And I looked at my target market in the trade show arena and I thought, well, who wants this kind of book? And so I went to the people who make the stands, the booths. And I said, hey, would you like to buy these for your customers? And we can, put your president's, a letter from the president in the front and a different cover on the book. It could be yours. And lo and behold, they bought 1,000 and they liked it so much, they bought another 1,000. So it took me as long to sell 2,000 books. And then I tried the same strategy with, I thought, well, I've been to the people who make custom exhibits. Let me go to the people who make portable exhibits. So I went to them and I said, how would you like to have this? Well, they said, it's too expensive. It's too big. Could you do a smaller version? So I rewrote it in, so that it fit what they needed. They just wanted sort of more of a booklet that they could send out to their prospects. And they bought, over the course of a couple of years, they bought 500,000 books and had them translated into 5 languages.
Wow.
So it's that was the power of being in a niche market.
Because you understand it, see, then you can actually go and target it. So you know where they live, right? You know where to fish. Exactly. The biggest problem is in a big pond, you can get all sorts of fishes, but if you know where the fish sit, then you've got a good chance of finding them in that pond, right?
Yes. Yeah, just go and fish where the fish are.
Yeah.
And, not try and... It's a big pond. It's a very big pond. Hey, and that's what what about the fish on my book?
Exactly.
Going in the opposite direction? This has got to be you.
It's the old blue ocean, red ocean, right?
Which is another great book. That's out there. But
I think that's the biggest problem is people don't want to do that niche thing. They don't want to get down deep in and think about too much about who they're writing to and who they're writing for. But then as you do that, the marketing gets so much easier, right? Because then you can just start going,
absolutely. You can be much more efficient and effective with a market that is targeted. And it's that fear of going out and being, I'm going to miss out on sales if I become a specialist rather than a generalist. And that's not the case, because actually, as a specialist, you can actually charge more. I mean, just think about, the medical profession. If you had a child with a heart condition, which would you prefer, to take him to, a GP, a generalist, an internist, or would you prefer that pediatric cardiologist who specializes in children's heart conditions? And look at the difference in terms of what the two might charge for their services. So the specialist definitely can charge more. So, don't negate that at all. And, whether you're an author or whatever industry you're in, I mean, the niche marketing concept applies to anyone in business as far as I'm concerned.
And I think the thing is that I always say to authors, and so you need to be something to someone, nothing. You don't want to be nothing to no one.
Exactly. And the more you're trying to be something to someone, out there, it's like... if you make it too big, it's going to get overwhelming and you're not going to enjoy it. And so when you're targeted, you can write about it. You can do, YouTube, social media that is all targeted to that particular audience. And obviously you're doing that well on LinkedIn if you're getting business from it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's, but very precise in LinkedIn. You can say, I'm looking for this sort of person to do this sort of thing. And LinkedIn's got a great search tool. So when we do a connection, I'm at the moment, going after authors, existing authors for an offer. I say, I'm looking to connect to authors who, are interested in bestseller. So that's the question I ask when I connect to them. All right. So you're already framing it to start with. This is the sort of person I'm looking for this reason. All right. And imagine people still connect and go, I'm not an author. I said, what, you didn't read it? You didn't read anything. Well, that's what happens, right? People don't read, listen, or pay attention.
Yeah.
And so you got.
But I could make you a bestseller if you wanted.
Yeah, let's do that, right? And some people go, I would love to do a book. So it's created their interest because it's connected those words together, because people don't read everything completely, right? They just look at key words. And it's an interesting thing we talked about repurposing material, because I think one of the things that authors tend to do is that they write the book, they're exhausted by the time they've done that book, they launch it, and then the thing just dies off. And I was checking the other day a couple of authors that we did books years ago, and their book's not even on their website. They talk about their book, they've got a picture of their book, but no link to buy that book. And you think, you got sick of it. You actually got to a point where you just got sick of the book because you'd seen it so much, you thought that was it. that you've done enough work for the book. I don't have to do anything. I'll move on to the next pretty shiny object, and I'll leave that book in as. But the reality is, you got to thumb like.
You can do so much with that book.
That's right.
I mean,
and so,
each chapter could be broken up into, a booklet, and you can create checklists. You can create tip sheets. I mean, you can create so many different things out of just one book.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It can keep you going for a long time.
So one of the things that I'm doing is we're launching a podcast platform, and we're looking at. And to me, it's like what's the laziest way you can do marketing, right? Because if you're doing tough and you're going to, like in your situation, you set yourself a goal and said, okay, I'm going to do this podcast every week or every month. And that's your content creation goal, right? And something else that's more about you getting it done and being responsible to get it done. And I think that's part of the problem, is that consistency over time. But what people do is they try to do too much, right? I've seen them on Facebook. They'll come up and they'll do a Facebook Live every day for a month, and you'll never see them again, right? Yeah. That's it. They've done that and they never do it. It's where they could have done a Facebook Live every month for a year and been able to sustain it in that situation.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah.
I mean, as I said to you, I've been doing this weekly for 4 years, bar the few weeks that I took off when my father passed away. But and I feel it's only now that it's actually starting to gain momentum. Mm-hmm. And it at times I was like, is this worth it? And I'm like, yes, just keep at it. I enjoy doing it. And so long as I enjoy doing it, I can be of benefit to my target audience.
And so this interesting thing when we talk about repurposing, right? Because the reality is that if you've done a podcast interview or you've done a podcast, you've created content. But the reality is that content is useful for other purposes. Like, for example, you can make a blog post out of it. You can make a video out of it. You can, make an email out of it. Like make an article in LinkedIn out of it, right? That's another thing people don't think about, is articles in LinkedIn work really well too. Is so that you got to have that repurposing kind of strategy, right?
Exactly. But you've got to think like that. And, I mean, I like cutting and slicing and dicing the material that I have, because I'm lazy. I don't want to have to think of something new. Yeah. But take what I've got and repurpose it, as you said. I mean, I love doing tip sheets, for instance, and they're so easy to do. Yeah. And, in a book, you've got hundreds, if not thousands of tips. And you can turn those tips into checklists, and you can do a special report, and you can do the podcast and your articles and blog posts and memes and all of those different things. It's all in the one book. You don't have to go anywhere else for new information, because if you're the expert in a subject, just keep tossing out that expertise.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I think the whole getting sick of it scenario, because you think of something like Colgate toothpaste, right? It's probably the most boring thing ever, right?
Look how long it's been on the market.
It apparently took I think it was 10 or 20 years to convince people to use toothpaste, by the way. Really? It wasn't something that just tomorrow they started using toothpaste. That was something that took time.
Well, you have to educate people
and it took
about something new.
10 years to get market saturation for TV, right? Mm-hmm. So the average product now's market saturation is like a year or two in comparison, because the marketing's so much faster.
Well, and we've got so many different more avenues to go after to use marketing. I mean, before it was, print ads and maybe radio, and when television came along, it was television. But before that, it was print.
And I think that's the biggest problem. So if you were trying to market toothpaste, that's a tough gig, right? To keep that relevant for that long time and keep marketing. Because if you look at it, in my opinion, that everything you use on a daily basis is something, generally speaking, that's marketed. You would have seen an ad for it. You see another ad for it. You drive in a car, use toothpaste, watch a TV. Like everything you use is marketed. People say marketing doesn't work, but it does, because every single thing you use.
Of course it does. Exactly. And you know what? New and improved. Dynamite words to use.
Yeah, new.
Dynamite.
Secret's the best word. Like, there's no other word but secret. People go, I don't like the word secret. I said, but it works. If you're going to tell someone a secret.
Exactly. People love secrets. The secret ingredient. We have got the secret ingredient to help make your teeth whiter, I
bet you KFC's secret ingredient isn't as exciting as you think, right? It's like, it's probably some herb, something that will taste pretty good. That's it. And so,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and we get into habits of doing things and using certain products, and there's an education that goes on. But if you're an expert in an area, or you want to be known as an expert in an area, you've got to toot your own horn about that expertise. And keep at it. Just keep at it and keep at it. It's like chipping away. And Rome wasn't built in a day. I think we've sort of come full circle with that, because we said it's going to take a little bit, but it's possible. And I believe it's easier when you find that niche market than
and it's interesting actually, because of that. Like I see a lot of times when authors write one book, right, and and they're almost talking about their next book, even before the first book isn't come out, right? So they're talking about writing that next book, right? So they think they're going to be something like, going to write multiple books over time, and that's going to make a difference. What they do is they kind of left that book go. And I was just recently, I actually looked at a book that I had written called Everything You Know About Marketing Is Wrong, and that was written a few years ago. And I went back and redid that book, essentially, reformatted it, went through the whole book, found mistakes or things that needed to change because things had changed over time, repurposed it, put a new edition out, and that month we sold more books. Like suddenly the book sales went up. Just purely by that.
Right. I think something too that's really important is if you write about an evergreen topic, and then, as you said, marketing is an evergreen topic. However, some of the tools change over time, and it's easy to update it, but the marketing concepts haven't changed.
No, exactly. The core message of the book is the same, but the inside the book is like there's URLs, and the old day when I used to put too many website addresses in books, and then I say to my authors, you're allowed one. Right, everything goes to one place, right? Because they think they're going to maintain all these websites, but they never do.
Yeah.
So you end up in that situation where the customer journey is bad because they go to a website that doesn't exist anymore, and it's the best way to lose a reader or a prospect is you go to a website that doesn't work anymore. And so I think that whole thing of making it bulletproof in that process, thinking about the customer journey, but then going deep on that content, right? So your book becomes your marketing plan for the next 5 years. There's plenty of books out there that continually get purchased every day. You want to say the Bible's one of them, right? That book is going on.
That's been around for quite a long time, and I think it's
every day. It's like, do you think if the guy who wrote that book was thinking, I'm sick of this book now, I'm not going to market it anymore, I'm going to write a new one, going to write a new Bible? It's like, well, you confuse your marketplace, wouldn't you, right? And so I think at the end of the day, it's like, you look at some of those books like The Entrepreneurial Myth. There's all sorts of books out there that's basically been there for 20, 30, 50 years, become stable, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, all these books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all those books are all continually marketed to this day. And I think that's what people don't realise is they kind of move on to something when they really haven't done it justice. They haven't really invested back. I reckon you should invest as much time in marketing a book in terms of time as you spent writing it, at least.
Oh, yeah. Without any shadow of a doubt.
You spend a year marketing that book.
As well as I mean, people put so much time, energy, money into getting the book out, in physical form. And then it's like, okay, now I've given birth to this baby, you take care of it for me. Well, no, this is your firstborn. Yes. Are you going to put it out to an orphanage, somebody else to take care of? I don't think so. And you know what? Nobody else has got the passion for your material.
Yeah, you're your best copywriter at the end of the day.
The best person to sell, my stuff is me, and the best person to sell your stuff is you, because you've got the passion for it. I've got the passion for mine, and as long as that passion, that fire in the belly is still burning, then you're good. But if it isn't burning, and maybe there wasn't even a real passion there in the first place, that's when you're going over looking for the next shiny object.
Because marketing's like the stock market to me. Like if the stock market knows when it's a dud, right? They see the activity, they know the numbers, and I think at the end of the day, as marketing's the same way. It goes up and down, but your value and your marketing and your share price, if you like, is all to do with how much work you do and how much communication you do with investors.
That's an interesting analogy. I'd not thought of it like that, but I like that analogy. It's really good.
I just came up with it, by the way, too. So I just thought, there you go. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the and also I think what people forget about in books is there's different sorts of people looking at your book pages. And there's a guy I interviewed years ago in a summit that said when someone visits your website, there's at least 7 types of people coming to your website. Do you cater for all those different sorts of people? And most people cater for one of them or 2 of them if they're lucky. They don't cover all the others. There's a really good interview with the guys on my virtual summit, which I won't even tell you what it says, but it was very good because he actually said, okay, these are the strategies you need to lay out to actually think about all this traffic and how you can actually deal with them when they come to your page. Because you just think someone's just going to buy your book. But it could be a media person coming in to figure out whether they can do an interview with you on podcasting or they just discovered your book and they love it and they go to your website and they get nothing from you. There's no even way to contact you, right? So you haven't thought about that, or there's no media pack. And I think that's the thing you got to remember is when you're doing a book, there are components and there's different types of people that you're marketing to, not just the reader. It's the friend of the reader, the people's going to recommend to that reader. There's the marketing, there's the book club that might decide to pick your book up and read it, right?
Yeah, no, that's a really valid point, because the fact is that you're only thinking in terms of, one buyer who's going to come, and you think that everybody's going to come as a buyer, but you're right, it isn't. It's like the media. The media do go to websites. They do look at your LinkedIn profiles. They do look you up on social media.
How do you make it for them? And I say a lot of people with social media, right? If you don't have a lot of followers, particularly Twitter is the worst, right? If you don't have a lot of followers, don't put the link on your website, right? Because you think you're doing the right thing because the web designer guy told you to put all the links of your social media up there, right? So then you go and check it and find they've got 5 followers on Twitter, right? Well, the reality is that completely destroyed your brand now. So if you're looking at your brand and you're looking at people going on various social media, I say own your own social media. But if you think you're going to have a Twitter account, you're going to own, not market it, don't promote it, right? Don't say to them, come join my Twitter account. And you go there and it's like 5 people there, right? I had someone the other day, I saw this promotional guy for TED Talks, right? He said that they would get you viewed on TED, get your TED Talk viewed. So very niche market, very well done, going after TED Talks and marketing those people, great. And probably a bleeding neck because they're probably not getting enough views. So excellent at that start. Went to their website, tried to find their social media, didn't have any social media links at all on their website, did a bit more research, came across their Facebook page, it's got 10 likes. I think, I was the first like that ever been on their Facebook page, right? No YouTube page, nothing. And they're saying they're going to market you and get you known and get all these views. Yet when I look at them in the face value, it's like, how are you going to do that? You haven't convinced me that you can actually do the job. Because you don't have any social media, you don't have any presence, you got this website you knocked up, and that's it. So you can't prove to me that anyone even accepts you or whatever, or even knows about you anymore. So that social proof is very important.
The social proof is really important, and you make me feel very guilty because social media is definitely not my thing, and I know it needs to be, even though if you look at my sites, you'll see that I've got hundreds, if not thousands of followers. I know a lot of people and they all want to follow me, and I'm like, okay, that's great. I'm not sure what you're following me for at this point.
And I think one of the things is laziness for us, because what we did with my platform was we set up an RSS feed. So what people, if they don't understand what RSS feed is, basically when you post something, a feed reader reads it. So with podcasting, that's how a feed this is just
exactly, and that's what we've got with ours. Yeah.
And so what we did is we created that for blogs as well, and then we just plug it into our social media, all our social media platforms. So someone creates a blog on their own platform, and it punches it out to all those social media platforms instantly. What's happened is you didn't have to you've repurposed your content on all those different platforms without actually having to do anything. And so I think that kind of, and the same thing, and the other thing I noticed a lot of people is that on Amazon, you got an Author Central account, which most people don't know they got. You can plug your feeds into that as well. You can plug your podcast and your blog into that, and you can feed content into Amazon. So when they click on your book and they click on your name, which they're going to do because it says that, click on my name, right? And you click on your name, you get, what do they say about you, right? And I think is the thing, is that if you've got all this content, like you're talking about repurposing, make sure that it actually gets seen, not just one place. Like you write a blog article and that's it. It doesn't go anywhere else.
Well, I know every time that you and I talk, there's always something that comes up and I'm like, oh my goodness, John's got so much to teach me.
And the thing is, just it's the same thing. It's a concept of doing it over and over again. You do it so many times, you get used to it. It becomes a natural thing that you know about this stuff. And you talk to someone and go, I have no idea. Spend a day with someone who's got no clue, and you realise how much you actually know. All right. I'm not saying you don't even know what's going on, but the reality is what happens is you end up in a situation where if you do it long enough, you become an expert. You see things that other people don't see. And then eventually it becomes, I just know that, I know that. And the reality is there's some really basic stuff, like that, like you're talking about checklists, right? That basic stuff, people don't know it. You think they know it. They underestimate the intelligence of the reader sometimes. Like the reader is reading your book to understand what you're talking about, and you're assuming they already know. They don't.
Never assume. Never assume. You know what that stands for? Making an ass of you and me.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
It's like, absolutely. And you make a really good point there, because people want the 101, even though they think they want the PhD level. It's really the 101 basics, because either they're not doing the basics or they forget the basics, and they need the basics because that is the foundation. And that's why, going back to the Dummies series or the Idiot's Guide series, that's exactly what role those books filled, was to explain all the things that people just don't understand.
Yeah, and that's the thing to be careful of, because people don't know as much as they think they do. And I think at the end of the day is going after that customer that actually doesn't understand is a great place to be, because they're going to appreciate everything you tell them, and they're going to understand it, and they're going to hoover up more information. Whereas if you say to someone, I already know this, and so that's getting right into that niche and understanding that person is going to benefit from your book. I remember meeting the first book I ever wrote, right, which is the bizarrest title. I can't even remember the title because it's made it too long. It's my test book, right? I wrote this book, and I didn't do too badly. I did everything I could have done wrong. But anyway, I had this meeting with this guy. He emailed me or something, and he lived locally, and he's written a lot of books. Like, this guy writes a book a week. My God, he writes. Anyway, we have a coffee, and he brings out, and what he did, this is because he didn't have a printed copy of my book, so somehow he managed to print my ebook. And he's got the ebook out, and he's got all these notes and stuff. He'd gone through this book thoroughly, like every page he'd written notes, and so we spent like an hour in this coffee shop where he asked me follow-up questions from this book about internet marketing, it was. And most of the stuff, I thought everybody knows this stuff. I was just like putting it in one place, didn't really think much of it. But this guy had read it from cover to cover, analysed it all, and had all these follow-up questions. And I thought to myself, wow. Like, that was never what I thought would happen. You know what I mean? Like, you don't think someone's going to read it from cover to cover and drag it out. And he did. And I think that's the thing. You don't know what's happening at the other end of that book and what they might.
Well, and I think it goes back to assuming that people know. And when you know something, you think everybody else knows what you know. But that couldn't be further from the truth, because everybody's got different experiences. Everybody's had different exposure to different things in their life, and they know one thing and you know another. And I know when I interview my guests on my Book Marketing Mentors podcast that I make sure that they're not talking any sort of jargonese, because I never want to assume that my listeners know what they're saying. And I said, well, just for the listeners, can you explain exactly what that means? Because I don't want to assume that they know what they're talking about, even though I might know what it is. I never want to assume that. So, yeah, I like to dumb it down. And that's why writing for Dummies and, for Idiot's Guide was a fabulous lesson, because you really had to keep everything basic. And I remember when the books were being edited, that the editors came back and they said, well, you need to explain this because it's not clear. And I was like, okay.
And that's the power of editing, right? I think what happens, editing and proofreading, people read things, I don't understand what you're talking about, because you can't do your own editing and proofreading.
You can't. Not at all. I can't even see my own mistakes. I don't.
Saying in our business, it's called assumption is the mother of all stuff ups. Actually, there's another word used for that, but basically, it's like, and that's the thing, is you're assuming that people know stuff and they don't,
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you can go back to the
Never
basics.
assume.
Yeah, yeah.
Never assume. Be basic, and it's the basic books that sell more than anything else. And how-to books.
Mm.
When authors come to me and they've got these fancy, titles and subtitles, and I'm like, yeah, you can have it as a title, but definitely tell the audience, what's this book about? Is
What's your
it what?
promise?
It's
What do
a
you promise?
how-to book. People
Mm.
love how-to books.
Yeah, book blueprints, anything that's sort of like in a scenario where they really want to take your knowledge,
Systems. Yeah,
put in a decade, in a day, and basically get that out. And I think that's where the people sort of why the people buy books mostly is to speed things up, right? They're trying to solve.
exactly.
And yeah, so cool. Well, we probably went longer than expected, but that's okay. So
We didn't run out of stuff to talk about.
no,
That's
no,
for
I'm
sure.
engaging. We should like part 2, part 3. It's really funny actually. I've looked over some of the podcast interviews, and I think we're probably almost. It's almost like a trick I've managed to come up with is that I've somehow managed to make it 52 to 53 minutes, right? And it's like I have never intentionally done that, but it's almost like I think it comes up to the hour, and some people just move over. But it's
Exactly.
quite interesting. And I've managed to kind of keep around that range, so it's all pretty good. So if someone wants to talk to you and get access to what you do and basically what talk more about maybe marketing their book. And I know that we've done a new marketing university, author marketing university website for you and stuff like that. But what's the best way to contact you now? Is through a website?
So my Aviva Publishing website is going to be reconstructed. So I'm going to send people to my book marketing mentors, even though it's the podcast website. It's got a wonderful schedule, a call with me. And absolutely, I'd love to give your listeners a 15, 20-minute call where we talk about, their niche market and just to better understand what they want to do and what's the best market for them to specialize their products or services in.
No.
So yeah, go to the bookmarketingmentors.com website. And I've also got a special gift for your listeners. Consultation, as I say, 15, 20 minutes, and then a copy of the Riches and Niches book.
Nice.
I've got a PDF copy that I'd love for you to share. And then I've got 10 questions how to find your niche market. And people really like those. So
Nice.
I'd love to give that to your listeners as well.
No dramas. We might even set a bit of a special link there and give them the extra information to grab it. That's great. So really
Excellent.
appreciate that. It's good.
No problem.
All right. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Probably go on for hours, and like at the end of the day, it's probably people are going to go, I'm going to do something now. So,
Yeah.
and I think, Buzz, you need
And
to
I didn't even ask you about the website, the Author Marketing University website. So,
So
and that's another. They can go and sign up for the course too. The authormarketingu.com.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a great place to start. Like I think it's the clearer you get on your perfect customer, the better off you're going to market. The simpler it is, the lazier you can be. Because I think trying to market everyone is so exhausting. And most marketers never attempt that anyway. So, all right. Well, thanks again, Susan, and we'll talk.
Thank you.